Good evening, everyone. This is Donald. It is late Thursday night, early Friday morning. It's about 1 in the morning. I'm back with another podcast. This time I'm talking about COVID-19 and the anti-Asian incidents that have been being passed around social media, maybe a little bit in the news. This subject's pretty touchy, could be somewhat political. I'm going to try to avoid the politics, but I'll admit, I'm a little bit annoyed, a little upset over what's been happening, what I see on social media, a little bit on the news, and I wanted to address the situation. I'll keep in mind, I'm not really into politics and talking about some of those things that have been going on, but I do want to address some of the history of some of these anti-Asian incidents and some of the background that I'm aware of and how they all lead into some of the current stuff that we all have to deal with and whatnot. So feel free to comment, questions, whatever. Again, like I said, on either my Facebook page or YouTube. Hopefully I don't offend, but if I do, apologies. But you know what? This one's a touchy subject, so not everyone's going to like what I have to say. And, well, guess what? We'll just have to deal with it. So with that background, you know, we all know what the situation is. We've got leaderships around the world in our government who are calling, instead of the normal COVID-19, they're giving it names like the Chinese virus, you know, whatever you want to call it. There's some disagreements from other folks who said it's racist, all of that. We're not going to cover that. However, some of that, regardless of the situations, all of that stuff that's going on in the media is leading into these anti-Asian incidents, because there's been basically some blame from our politically minded folks that it's a Chinese problem, basically, right? And that's leading to these incidents. So, that being said, one of the first points I want to make is I don't think everybody's a racist. Yes, these incidents are happening. Yes, I'm seeing them. Yes, some of them are far away. Some of them are, I saw one that's maybe close to home. Sucks. But in general, I think people are not racist. I have a lot of friends, Asian, non-Asian, all across the board, men and women, all across the board. You know what? We all get along fine. So this is not meant to be a thing to divide people. I'm trying to make this an educational thing so people understand, and maybe hopefully for those who never knew some of the history of these anti-Asian stuff, not just the more recent ones, they'll learn something from it, but also be something that our Asian folks can take away and be aware, because, you know, it goes both ways, man. There's people who are not aware of the history of how Asians have been treated, but there's also some Asians who don't know either. So I'm going to try to educate you guys folks. So that being said, the next point is, if not everyone's racist, why are others who may be racist? If we had a great answer for this, we probably would have solved that problem a long time ago. But I don't have a great answer for it. But to me, in general, there may be people, it could be older people, could be middle-aged people, could be even younger people who really don't have very much experience dealing with Asians. I'm saying Asian in general, even though people have been calling it the Chinese virus. I'm saying Asian in general because as much as Asians like to segregate themselves being Chinese, Japanese, Korean, etc., in the Western world, especially U.S., but even in other countries like the U.K. and whatnot, Asians are kind of lumped together. You know, we're all yellow people, basically. Yes, not very political, but that's the way it is. So, but there's folks who basically don't deal with Asian folks much, and sometimes they're heavily influenced by the media and the news. So if you look at the more recent media and news, obviously a lot of the discussions around the virus, a lot of our government folks are calling it the Chinese virus, or they're just blaming the country of China overall for the virus. And if you see the more recent incidents, most of it is folks who are confronting Asian folks saying, well, you're to blame for bringing the virus to this country, blah, 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 whatever it may be. And guess what? We don't know if that's true or not. We don't know how the virus came over to the U.S. You know, did it originate in China? It may be, but that doesn't mean someone from China brought it over. We don't know that. Nobody will know that, regardless of the situation. But a lot of it is led by the media. The news is going on these days, especially 24/7. about these kind of situations. And to be frank, in my next point, when it comes to these kind of situations, there's always someone to blame for these kind of situations. What do I mean? Well, for Japanese Americans, very sensitive topic. Think back to Pearl Harbor. Most of us listening to this are probably not old enough to have been around during Pearl Harbor, maybe a few folks. Well, remember what happened to the Japanese Americans? Well, they were put in internment camps back in those days. Japanese Americans were feared to be collaborating with the Japanese who had invaded Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese Americans were put essentially into a prison, lost their jobs, lost their businesses, their families may have been broken up, all of those things. I'm not really qualified to talk about it, but I'm sure you can go read different books about it. You've heard George Takei, the Star Trek person, talk about those experiences. Even though the Japanese Americans may not have had anything to do with Pearl Harbor, they were blamed. Then also, of more recent vintage, September 11th, after September 11th, guess what? There was a lot of blame that it was a Muslim issue. Muslim Americans were put on the hot seat. They might have been, looked at suspiciously every time they walked around. Right? So, I mean, it's kind of crazy that, there's always somebody to blame, and whether or not they were directly involved, they get picked on. And we can name a lot of different examples of that kind of situation. And some may say, well, hey, we have to be, we have to keep our country safe, all of that. You know what? That's fine and that's what the politicians may say. But what the politicians don't realize, because usually they're so far, and you're usually rich folks, and they're so far removed from the day-to-day experience of normal people that they don't realize the politics, especially when it's played out through the media, bleeds down to the individual experiences of people, and people basically get picked on, and things get done to them, which, those high-level people may never realize because they're just so far removed from it. So one example, going to my next topic, of a example of blaming gone bad. If you're not familiar with this, look it up. I'll give you a brief history. Look up a guy named Vincent Chin and look it up on Wikipedia. And you might find something if you just do a Google search. Who's Vincent Chin? Vincent Chin was, I believe, I think he was an auto worker working back in Detroit. This was in the early 80s. If you think back to the early 80s, during that time, the U.S. or American car industry was going through a transition because the Japanese cars and Japanese auto manufacturing was starting to kind of edge out the American car companies, and a lot of American businesses, especially the car manufacturing factories in Detroit, were getting put out of business, and some folks were losing jobs. So Vincent Chin and some of his friends who were in Detroit at that time in the early 80s were just simply drinking at a bar, got into a confrontation with a couple of guys. Don't remember their names off the top. I think one of them was Ronald Ebens, and there might have been another guy. They confronted Vincent Chin and his friends, and nothing happened. They were at a bar, but later, after the Vincent Chin and his friends left, I think the two guys, Ronald and the other guy, chased Vincent out or followed him out, and they beat him to death. At the time, Asians were not necessarily a big factor politically, or number of people in the country at the time were in terms of Asian Americans was not as large as it is in the more recent times. So there was a court case, there's a criminal case. I think the guys who effectively did kill Vincent Chin got off with a fairly light sentence. There was kind of some outrage from the Asian American community, and there was an attempt to get the two defendants to kind of be punished. I don't think they got a very long prison sentence, if at all. I think there was some monetary settlement that maybe got paid off a little bit. But ultimately, Vincent Chin, if people look back at it from a history standpoint, that was the beginning of the Asian American civil rights movement. where people realize, hey, man, we have to kind of stand up for ourselves. And a lot of Asian American groups were formed to kind of help Asian Americans not ever, basically not to have experienced such a controversial situation ever again. So that's one really bad example. Am I saying that any of the incidents that have occurred recently with the COVID-19 been that bad? Probably not. However, do you want to take that chance? I worry, to be perfectly frank, I worry about my friends who go out there, especially the ones who have kids. Maybe they have to deal with this. I'm not particularly scared for myself. I think I can handle myself just fine. I haven't faced any situations just yet. Not saying I won't. But when I was younger, I felt racism. I may have mentioned it in my basketball podcast about some experiences I had when I was young. So if it does happen, I wouldn't be surprised because I've dealt with it before. But I generally think the people I'm around these days are not racist across the board. But there will be idiots out there who may be. And if they are and they confront me, I'll be prepared to deal with it. But that being said, what can we do about this? Well, there's people already trying. Politicians, some of the media, other Asian celebrities have stepped up in different ways to denounce the way the leaders are presenting the virus and denouncing the actions of those folks who have been harassing or, in some cases, assaulting just regular Asian people for just being Asian and for supposedly being the cause of the virus. There are Asian people who have started Facebook groups, started posting stuff on Instagram, on Facebook, whatever, bringing up this behavior and hopefully bringing it up with local authorities as well, sharing their experiences, all of that stuff. But one of the frustrations I have with all of this is a lot of these attempts to bring up incidents are not being carried by the mainstream media. Mainstream media just kind of continues on with their political slants and whatever. So, the voices of the individuals and of the media people, even the celebrities, while helpful, don't always get across to everybody. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this. My reach is probably not all that great. I'll probably post it on Facebook, get it to some friends. If people want to share it, great. But I think that's one of the last things I'm talking about. What can we do is, you know what? We're all going to have to speak up. Asians for too long have been too quiet when individual incidents happen. Also, when it's been brought up, even when it's brought up on a public standpoint, some non-Asians will brush it off, says, oh, you guys are being too sensitive. Well, screw that. Let's get to the point. Any type of racism, any type of incidents when you're picked on because of your race sucks. You know what? It's not simply a African-American experience where they've been discriminated against, and they have been. They've had it really bad. But Asians are always kind of brushed off as, you know what? We don't need to worry about you guys too much. We'll make fun of you and all that. And that's always been okay for all sorts of reasons. Well, whatever those reasons are, whatever reason why it's always been that way, well, it's time to stop. And I'm not gonna deal with it. If I get picked on, I'm not gonna put up with it. I'm gonna set people straight. But what can we do in the future for it? Well, I'm hoping once the situation resolves and everybody gets healthy. At the end of the day, I want people to be healthy. It's a sucky situation for the virus to get so many people across the world, not just the U.S., across the world. And I hope everybody gets healthy from it and we can move on. But I hope Asians and Asian Americans have realized that we need to unify and band together and collectively speak out against these issues. For way too long, we've had a lot of Asians and Asian Americans who basically have different experiences. And I understand, right? For example, I'm Asian American. I was born here, and I've seen a lot of crap. But these days, we got a lot of immigrants who come from China. And their experience coming from a majority Asian country is they don't really understand, or maybe they don't even care, and that's okay too, from a certain extent, the experiences that we have to deal with. because some of those folks are so used to being in a majority country, and they may hang around a lot of Asians more than they do other folks sometimes. They don't necessarily realize what some things are being done and how they're said and how they could impact us. But regardless, we need to get those experiences. We need everybody to kind of unify. And again, you know, there's folks who have been born here in the West Coast that basically, because we're surrounded by a very diverse culture with a lot of accepting people, we don't feel as much racism. But if you were born in a different part of the country, especially in the U.S., where maybe there were less Asians, you might feel it more. And you know what? We need to put all those differences aside, regardless if you were born here or what part of the country you're born in, or whether you were born in this country or not, in the U.S. meaning. We need to get together, stand firm, and say, that's enough's enough. We're not going to be stepped on and put down anymore. And how we're going to do it, that's a different problem. I think there's a lot of activism groups out there, a lot of media, individual smaller media outlets out there. But regardless, somehow we need to find a unify that, because I'm tired of it. It is very, very bad to see this, and it's very scary when a friend of mine on Facebook says, hey, I worry when my husband and kids go out whether I'll see them again, because I don't know what's going to happen, especially with the political rhetoric that's going on. That is a sad commentary on the situation when a friend has to worry about her family and whether they'll be okay when they go outside. Anyways, I usually don't get too worked up about stuff, but this stuff does annoy me. So hopefully this was educational. Hopefully people aren't offended. But regardless, I wanted people to understand that this is what stuff we've gone through. For the folks who are non-Asian, who may be listening, hope you understand that there's been a lot of history about Asians being treated badly and people getting blamed. For the Asians, hey, same applies to you, man. There's folks who are Asian American, lived in the country for a long time, or maybe was born here, maybe never experienced any racism, didn't know who the hell Vincent Chin is. Well, you know what? Just because you didn't feel it and the people around you generally accept you doesn't mean everybody did. And there's some bad stuff. And we need to, rather than focus on ourselves and our experience and say, hey, well, if I'm okay, everyone else should be. Well, no, that's not true. A lot of people are not okay. And time for us to step up. Any case, I'm done here. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you found it useful. Let me know what you think. And I'll probably be back tomorrow. Let's see. I don't have any ideas what I want to talk about, but I'm sure some ideas will come up. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good evening and a good day tomorrow, and I will catch you soon. Bye now.